In this week's episode, I am joined by Chris Stockel, who is the founder of Mind Body Project New York City. He found a way to combine two of his favorite things, meditation and HIIT workouts, to create a fabulous workout class and studio in New York City. I absolutely love this conversation that I had with Chris because he talks all about his journey with anxiety, leaving the corporate world to build his own brick and mortar business, launching and opening the doors, trying to in the middle of the pandemic and having to delay the opening for a full year. He also talks about his journey with his mental health and how he still believes that you can be successful and build your own business, even if you struggle with things like anxiety. He really brings such a beautiful and profound perspective to learning how to trust yourself, how to listen to your intuition, and how to utilize your network and your community to build a successful business. So I know you guys are going to love this episode, and please make sure to leave us a rating, whether it is on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It is much appreciated. Now let's get right into the episode. I'd love to hear and for you to share more with the audience about your story and your why for building Mind Body Project.
Yeah, totally. So I think a good place to start is probably describing what Mind Body Project is. So it's a fitness studio that I founded about a year and a half ago. It's located in Chelsea, in the Chelsea neighborhood in New York City. And we have a unique class concept that is inclusive of meditation and high-intensity interval training. So there's both a mental wellness component to class as well as a very exhausting physical component as well. Trying to tap into, people's mental health as well as their physical health in one sitting, so to speak. So studio's been open, like I said, for about a year and a half. It's been going great. And how did I get here and my why? That's a longer story, but the number one reason is because I've always personally had issues around anxiety. Since I was an adolescent, it's always been something that I'm trying to work on and address and have had many struggles with. So I was always relentless, however, about trying to find outlets and avenues that help me feel better. So sports growing up, that was always something that helped me be much more present in the moment and not thinking so much, more just acting. And then, went through college, studied psychology and entrepreneurship, which is kind of like the exact right mix for what I think that I built. And then I went into the workforce. I went into digital media. I worked in a sales capacity at a number of different startup.coms, and it was great. I did super well in the industry. However, I was still dealing with the anxiety issues, some depression issues as well. And I decided to step up my fitness routine because it had kind of fallen off. And I started taking HIIT classes, which, as you know, are super challenging. And you really don't have the capacity to overthink about what happened earlier in your day or what's going to happen after class. You're really very much in the moment. So that was really a breath of fresh air for me. Even though you're kind of going through torture at certain moments, I loved it because it kept me present. And then the other thing that I did was I had heard from a high school friend about transcendental meditation. And for anyone who is not aware, that's a pretty typical form of meditation. It's very beginner friendly. Essentially, you meditate twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon or evening for 20 minutes each. And you're given a mantra by whoever teaches you the discipline. And you repeat that mantra in your head over and over throughout your meditation. So I went into that training experience, thinking that I had a lot of misconceptions about meditation like it was going to be some hippie kind of environment with like, you know, incense burning and super spiritual. It was quite the opposite. It was more like just regular people who wanted to like feel better and you know, perform better during their day. Like everyone was super relatable. So I fell in love with transcendental meditation. So I had these two parallel disciplines that helped me dealing with my own issues in the mental health department. I had the fitness avenue and the meditation. So I'm continuing to go through my career, and I come to a place where I'm like, I don't see a fitness studio or a fitness concept that has combined both in one comprehensive experience. So I noticed that void in the marketplace, and then my mind just kind of fixated on it and couldn't stop thinking about it. I was still working, but it really started to occupy a lot of my headspace, and I decided to quit my career and go full bore into starting what is now Mind Body Project.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I have so many questions. And I think the first one would be more about your journey with anxiety, because I know even in my life, sometimes I wonder, is it okay for me to say I have anxiety? How do I know this is not just a normal feeling? How do you diagnose it? So just your personal experience with learning about your own anxiety. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I recognized early on in my adolescence that I felt tremendous pressure on me to perform in big moments, and it was overwhelming. My heart would start beating out of my chest, and you know, get a little shaky, and this would happen to me during certain like public speaking engagements. In some sports moments as well, I would notice this, and just in observing others and in speaking to other, peers, they weren't experiencing that sort of thing. So I knew pretty early on, I would say in my 13, 14, 15-year-old years that, you know, my mind was working a little differently. But at that time, therapy wasn't as embraced as it is now, so it was something that I just kind of tried to suppress mostly, and pretend it wasn't there, but it obviously was. So, but then once I got to college and I really started, I was feeling the same anxiety that I had earlier in my life, but I was much more open to talking about it because I was studying psychology. And I found a social worker who's also, a therapist, and I decided to, take the leap and start therapy. I didn't even have a term for what I was experiencing at that point. Like, anxiety was not a word in my teenage years that really meant much to me. And then once I sat in the chair with this guy who was a wonderful therapist, he was like, everything you're describing, it's anxiety. Like that's kind of the bucket that you can place these feelings into. So that was just having a better understanding of what was going on with me, helped a lot. And I remained in therapy for most of my college years, and then I continued after college. And I've been through different forms of medications and antidepressants, and I've been on, I've been off. And to some people that might sound hectic, or that might sound like a bad thing, but actually for me, I find complete acceptance with it. I just want to feel the best I can, and if that means I'm off of meds and I'm feeling great, beautiful. If that means I'm not feeling so hot and I have to get back on meds, whatever gets me to feeling good, I'm okay with. I don't have much of a stigma around antidepressants, which Some do, and there's a debate to be had there. But for me, whatever helps me feel good is what I go with.
I love that. And it sounds like you've really built up a strong relationship to self and that trust with yourself, because this is something we need to talk more about. It's like, when do I know this is what I need versus a doctor or maybe someone you trust or someone in your life, your personal life, telling you this is what you should do. So I love that you made that point about, I know what's best for me and my body.
Yeah, and it takes a while to get there. There's a lot of trial and error and a lot of like soul searching and just spending time with yourself and just understanding what feels good, and always trying to lean into that. I mean, I also had bouts in my 20s. I'm 36 now, but in my 20s, unfortunately, I found some outlets that were not very productive, and drinking and substance abuse came into the picture. And of course, maybe in the moment, it made me feel better, but then the next day certainly doesn't make you feel any better. So, it's a journey, and like it took me a while to learn that. And to understand moderation and self-control and all of that.
I love that. And I would love to hear more about your experience, and even for the listeners, with transcendental meditation, because I never really looked that much deeper into meditation. But when you were like, I obviously meditate, well, I try to daily, but when you were talking about the specifics of it, I thought that was really cool. So what about transcendental meditation made you fall in love with it, that you were like, this is the one for me?
Yeah, so for me, it was very accessible. So essentially, I looked up different centers in New York City where they train people in this discipline. And it was like a 2-day seminar, which for me, I was like, that sounds doable. I was working at the time, so I didn't have like so much extra time to go through like a multi-week program or something like that, but it was just a weekend. So I liked that it was accessible. Its name is much fancier than the practice actually is in terms of its simplicity. It is, it's all about just sitting down in a comfortable position, closing your eyes. You have your mantra, and that's what you repeat in your mind over and over. And if you find that you haven't repeated it at all in the last 10 minutes and you forgot or whatnot, you always just gently come back to the mantra. And that's, that is at the core of, I think, most meditation practices, but certainly transcendental it's a totally non-judgmental discipline and practice. You're going to have thoughts. No one can shut their brain off. Not even the Buddhist monks can. It's your brain is going to be active. It's just about recognizing it and then gently coming back to whatever your point of focus is, which in TM, in transcendental meditation, it's your mantra.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. And I love the point about not shutting your brain off, because I think every meditation newbie is always like, how do I stop thinking? And it's like, you don't. It's about releasing the judgment to self.
Could not have said it better myself. Like, that is exactly, at the studio, of course, you would imagine I hear things like that constantly. I get a lot of people saying, I love the class, but I'm like so bad at the meditation. I can't get myself to just like silence my thoughts. And I'm like, let's take a step back here. Like, you're not bad at meditations. That's not really a thing. And you're not supposed to shut your mind off. Your mind's never going to turn off. It's about, like you said, finding acceptance with your thoughts happening and just kind of observing them and without judgment, just kind of letting them pass.
Yeah, absolutely. So what made you decide that you weren't going to continue in your corporate job and you were like, maybe it's time I do something for myself? I'd love to hear more about your journey with entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Once it became an idea that it was the last thing I thought about before bed, and then it was the first thing I thought about when I woke up, is like how badly I want to chase this thing and really build it out, and I think there's such a need for it. Once that started to happen, I then began speaking with other entrepreneurs, other friends, and just bright people who I trust, and started running the idea past a lot of good people. And of course, I got tons of feedback, both positive and constructive. But there was one thing that was clear from the jump, and that was the idea is original. I've not seen it done. I don't think anyone's seen it done. So like in a as you know, like a crowded boutique fitness marketplace where there's 10 different cycling studios and boxing gyms and nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of them. Just having a differentiated product and experience is a big win. So once I started to run the idea past friends and people who I trusted, then I really got the itch to start like putting things down on paper or on the computer. And I would go to on the weekends I would go to the New York Public Library and bring my laptop. And if anyone hasn't been to like the area where people do their studying and writing, there's like professors and students, and it's the most beautiful place ever. I've never felt more motivated to just sit there and do like good work, So I used to go there constantly because it's a very inspiring place. And I just started banging out a business plan. And fortunately, from like my college experience, I had an idea of how to build a business plan, but trust me, along the way with all this stuff, there was a lot of Googling and YouTubing and how to and using all the tools at my disposal because, first-time entrepreneur, you have some idea of what's going on, but a lot of it is uncharted territory that you're going to need help with.
Yeah, that's so good because I always say, like, I'm a professional Googler. Like, totally. I can Google, I can YouTube. It's all right there for you. And I think that there's a common misconception that building a business has to be fancy. I know sometimes even people may be listening and be like, a business plan? I would have no idea how to do that. And it's like, get the paper, get the Google Docs, and just start writing. Just start flowing.
I totally agree. Because you'll surprise yourself once you start putting things down, in a Google Doc or whatnot. You'll start expanding on these ideas, and then you'll start to really build and grow the ideas where it is a substantial document that really does kind of tell the story of what the business is and what its aims to be. So yeah, getting started is half the battle. I remember having nerves getting started before the business plan because it's like, okay, I'm really doing this. Like it started to feel very real, less like a friend of mine who I trust. Like here's an idea that I've been really like fixated on. But now when you're sitting there and it's you and the laptop, it's intimidating. But then once you get going, it's so natural. As long as you feel an intense passion and motivation for what you're doing, it'll feel good and natural once you get started.
Yeah, totally. And what did it look like from when you had the business plan, you had it all on paper? How did you actually move that into action? Did you need to get investors? How long did it take? What did that next step look like?
Yeah, so I was all self-funded, and that was through my, my previous career. I did well enough to have the initial capital investment required to start looking at spaces and looking at leases and doing all of that. So once I had it down on paper, I had everything laid out. It was a green light for sure. The next step that actually took the longest was finding the right space. I was looking all over Manhattan. I wasn't exactly sure what neighborhood to be in. I got close on a couple properties, but then deals fell through. So like I wanted to like get going, and start building out the space. But at the same time, you want to find a location that is conducive to what you're trying to build and is going to be accessible to the people who are going to be your customers, of course. So ultimately, I found a space in Chelsea at 23rd and 7th, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's like fitness, mecca over there. Like every studio and gym is there. So it was a little bit intimidating because there's a couple of schools of thought. One is like go into an untapped area and be like the first studio of your kind in the area, or go fish where the fish are. And I went for the latter, and I've got Barry's Boot Camp and Rumble and Solid Core and all these places like around the block. But at least I knew that it was fertile ground for fitness customers.
Yeah. By the way, I don't even think I mentioned this, but I've actually taken the class twice, everyone, and it's hardcore. Like, it's no joke. You think like, oh, it's meditation, they'll be easy on you. No. Like, we did like a influencer class there, was the most recent time I went, and me and my friend looked at each other, we're like, when's the last time we'd done a HIIT workout? It was hard.
It's funny you say that, and we get it often. But yes, you're totally right. Like, people think meditation, and then they think like the movement must be more like yoga inspired, perhaps. Or, we also, you've been to the studio, of course, and the common areas are very like Zen, sort of. So I think that some people walk in and they're like, oh, this is like a Zen kind of spa-like sort of feel. But yeah, once you get inside the studio and you start class, you get through your meditation, then you get warmed up, and then it's like game on. It's a tough class. Like, everyone struggles with the class, and that's our goal. We want people of all fitness levels to really be challenged in there. So that's kind of like what I've always said is I want to show every person who walks in there their most tranquil and peaceful moment of their day, as well as their most like exhausted and challenging moment of the day.
That's so good. And especially with a workout class, it's like I'm there to be pushed because I don't do that on my own. Like, when I'm on my own, I'm not going to push myself as hard as I would in a class. And that's why I sign up for classes, because I'm like, all right, I need a little kick in the butt to get myself moving here.
I was the same way. I mentioned earlier that, when I was into my mid-20s, I decided to take fitness more seriously. And prior to that, I was just working out kind of in the gym in my building, and very slow. It was half on the cell phone, half working out, just kind of like going through the motions, sort of.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's me.
Yeah, totally. And that's like most people. And then I had a client who was a friend also, and he was like, have you been to this studio? I had never been to really any studio, but Fitting Room. Are you familiar with Fitting Room? Okay,
I don't know.
So they have a few locations in the city, but essentially it's a high intensity interval class with a focus on kettlebells. So my client was like, let's get together and go do a class. I think you'll like it. And me thinking I was like in shape at that time, I went to that class and I was outside. I left the room in like 15 minutes. Like I was gassed completely.
Wow.
And it really made me learn that like fitness is not just standing in front of the mirror and doing like bicep curls like a few times a week. I was like, I wanted to get much better at HIIT, and I wanted to see myself improve. So I got super into like that studio and seeing growth and progress, and that's how I got into group fitness. And much like yourself, I too need the kick in the ass. I love the atmosphere of other people working really hard around me. I like having that accountability for myself, because I have a certain level of pride. I don't want to be the guy who's, slacking off. I've got a little bit of competitiveness, and then there's also like the community feel where like there's high fives happening and stuff, and I'm into that too.
Yeah. I love that. And so you opened the business in the middle of the pandemic, right? Which year was it?
So we were supposed to open the studio in May of 2020, but we all know what happened in March of 2020. So we were all ready to like basically done, ready to open in May. COVID happened. So we essentially, due to, governmental restrictions, like we couldn't open. So we went dark for a full year, which was tough. It's like, it was just like psychologically and emotionally like difficult, because it's like, you think of it at that point, it's your baby, right? I'm ready to show my baby to the world, and then all of a sudden it's you really kind of run into that, what was a brick wall of COVID. So thankfully I've like the most amazing team, and we all like stuck together through that year, and we would go to the studio masked up and socially distanced and just workshop things and just like keep the momentum going. And those people are still working at the studio to this day, and like the fact that they were willing to stick with something that, let's be honest, it was an indefinite like end date to COVID. It says a lot about like their commitment and their character.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love the idea of keeping the momentum up, having everyone go in. That's really cool. So when did you actually open the doors?
So we opened in May of 2021, and we opened with,
wow. So that was like 12 months.
Yes. We opened with like lots and lots of restrictions and, mask requirements and capacity limitations and all sorts of things. At the time, it sucked, of course. Like I wanted to open it and have as many people in class as we can, really fill out the room, but it wasn't safe at that point. But again, like everyone stuck with it. We knew that like, better days lie ahead. This eventually will get under control. So we were challenged, to deliver the experience in maybe not the way we had originally envisioned, but we were like, it's only going to go up from here. The experience is going to be better. And then, things progressed and vaccinations were made available, and then restrictions were lifted, and it took time, but it was so interesting because like things were really hard during the restrictions, because you had to have conversations with people about masking up, and people were concerned about social distance, rightfully so, and then we had to start checking vaccinations and like, a lot of, and taking temperatures, so a lot of steps and logistics built in. So like once that stuff was gone, we were like, wow, this is so pleasant. This is so much easier. It's like going through that grind makes you appreciate like the just seamless simplicity of running the studio now.
Wow. And how has it been like growing the studio? Because I think about this in terms of my own business, like my own business is online. So I'm
Mm,
always so interested in like brick and mortar because I'm just
yeah,
like, oh my God, like, for me, it's like the online space, I can just market to everybody. That's how I
totally,
feel. But with brick and mortar, I would love to hear more about like growing a physical location.
totally. Yeah, so there have been a few very successful strategies that we've employed. One is we've hosted a lot of events at our space, all different types of
Mm.
events like the one that you were at, but we've also done some that are more endemic to our mission, which is very much associated with the improvement of people's mental health. So, you know, World Mental Health Day, of course, like that, we did a big event for that. It was Mental Health Awareness Month. I believe it may have been in May. Could be wrong on that, but did a big event for
It's May or June,
for.
I think.
I think it's May. Yeah, you might be right. Big event for that. Of course, we got as much press and influential people in the door to help spread the word. Um, we built an ambassador program of people who, just have a large presence in the New York fitness scene, and they come and they help get the word out through social media and post stories and all that. So that was successful for us, and we continue to host events, and we also do like private events for corporations that want to rent out the
Mm.
studio and do a private class for their employees now that people are going back into the office and all of that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different marketing tactics that we took. Not a ton of paid, mostly organic. We did some paid social, but very little. For the most part, it's been organic. There's the one thing that we have going for ourselves. Like I said earlier, like it's a new concept, and people are just naturally curious. People hear
Mhm.
about a new studio and they're like, "Oh, what's it like? Oh, it's got meditation and it's HIIT." Like, it's kind of surprising to some people, of course. So I think that
Mhm.
curiosity brings a lot of people in the door.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I mean, being in the influencer space and being on that side, I see the power in it. I see the power in like building a community. And even in my business now, everything that I do is like community first. Like
Totally.
build the community first, and everything else will be easy.
Yes, absolutely. Find your people and take care of your people. Like that's the biggest thing. You don't
Oh, I
need
love that.
yeah, you don't need every person. I don't need every person in New York City to have Mind Body Project be their favorite, you know, fitness studio. Just people who align with who we are and really enjoy what we do and the experience, like, and identify them and then take extra special care of them.
I love that. I love that mission. So, what would be your best piece of advice to anyone right now who has a really good idea for a business, but they're just not sure where to get started? Maybe they're listening to this and they want to open up a fitness studio. What would you be your best piece of advice to them?
I think my best piece of advice would be to, tap into your contacts, into your network, and try and find someone, anyone who has done it, who has started a business or owns a business, or even someone who's like had a business and it closed. Like you can learn so much from so many different people's experiences in entrepreneurship. But I think that having someone who can be a sounding board, or maybe even better off, a mentor, that's ideal, because those people have been through it. They can help guide you, and they'll inspire you to, if they're a good mentor, they'll inspire you to overcome the obstacles and the challenges and the fears that linger in your mind.
Well, you are speaking my language because that's all the work I do. I'm a mentor, I'm a coach. So, like, I can't stress it enough that everyone needs that in their life, because I even say in my growth, and not just my business, but like my personal life, it's like I wouldn't be here without mentors, right? And it's like so nice and refreshing to hear it from someone else too. So I'm not repeating the same thing all day, but that's really awesome because you had a great idea, you made it happen, but it's so clear that it's like having that support, that trust with yourself. These are like the key things I'm taking away from this, and just continuing to follow that intuition, because you easily could have given up during the pandemic, but you didn't. You were like, let's keep the momentum, build the community, and that's really inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and to your point about mentorship, you know, I feel that we're oftentimes hesitant to reach out to that person. We might be bothering them, or I don't want to make their day tougher than it is, or they probably don't have time for this sort of thing. But in my experience, because I'm now on the other side of it, where some people come to me and I'm nothing but flattered and I'm like so happy
Yeah.
to speak to people about my journey and experience. I think most entrepreneurs are that way, where they, you know, there's a pay it forward element, and, you know, who doesn't like talking about their baby, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I love that. Chris, thank you so much. Where can everyone find you? What about if our New York City listeners want to come take a class? Tell us everything.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find us on Instagram at Mind Body Project NYC. My personal on Instagram is at Chris Stockel. And we are located at 23rd Street and 7th Ave in New York City. And yeah, we have classes 7 days a week. So come check us out if you're in the neighborhood or visiting. We will welcome all comers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Giulia.